This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanagh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, being homeless can cause enough problems, but when a shelter designed for protection becomes violent, even the streets seem safer. If you happen to be a mayor, having a security guard can offer some safety no matter where you are, although if your destination is Sunday lunch on a balcony in the quarter, that can raise other issues. We'll be looking at these stories tonight, as well as a new study on what is being called intimate partner violence, and we'll also examine the politics of recalls now that one is in play on the Northshore. Jazz Fest begins next week, and this year's event will certainly gather no moss with the Rolling Stones coming to town. We will look at what to expect about that. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL Louisiana, Channel 4, and LeBron Joseph, news anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV, Channel 26. All right, Mike, we're going to go on over to you because there was a picture that spoke 1,000 words, as they say, this week, that we saw this week, involving the mayor and her security guard. So tell us about it. Why has it caused such a kerfuffle?
Well, and you used the lead that I used in my story about this. Picture is sometimes worth 1,000 words and more. In this case, those words are contained in a complaint to the Public Integrity Bureau of the Police Department by the Metropolitan Crime Commission, who has provided this photograph from a tipster.
Let's take a look at the picture, too, while you're talking about it.
And this is the photographs in question. They are on the balcony of the Tableau restaurant, which is overlooking Jackson Square, St. Louis Cathedral. Interesting that was very close to the mayor's previous controversy with Officer Vappy at the Pontalba apartment.
And this is a prominent spot on a Sunday afternoon, a beautiful weather day, on the balcony, so anybody could see.
Yeah, given the proximity to Jackson Square, St. Louis Cathedral, Pontalba, and all the foot traffic that goes along there, I would say this is probably one of the more visible balcony spots in the entire city.
Friends Waterfest weekend, too.
Yeah, so it was Sunday late afternoon, and contained in that complaint letter from the Metropolitan Crime Commission was the obvious photos, as well as many questions that are brought up by this lunch or late afternoon, early dinner with the mayor and a member of her executive protection team, which includes Officer Vappy. And the way it was stated by Rafael Goyeneche of the Crime Commission was that if he is on duty, and there are some indications that he was assigned to the mayor that weekend, then that brings up a host of potential problems, including dining with the person he's supposed to be protecting. You can just sort of use common sense that if you're seated at a table and there's some threat coming onto that balcony from behind him, he is not going to be able to see that. All of the people involved in executive protection say that's sort of like executive protection 101, is that you know the doors and entrances and exits of any place where you're trying, to protect your official. And so multiple violations just on the protection part of it. Another potential violation is if other members of the protection detail are afforded the same access and opportunity to sit and dine with. And that was one of the things that got Officer Vappy in trouble when he was found long hours with the mayor at the city occupied Pontalba apartment, which seemed to go, above and beyond his hours on his timesheet. He actually got 2 letters of reprimand in that previous complaint. For a while, he was administratively reassigned off of that detail while that was investigated. And but one of the findings was that he was given the kind of privileges and access that other members of the security detail did not get. So there was some either preferential or special treatment, and that would raise the question if any of the other officers on our security detail are also sitting and enjoying a relaxing Sunday afternoon, late lunch with the mayor. If he happened to be off duty, although he was apparently, on duty that weekend, but maybe that was the hour he knocked off, then it gets into another NOPD policy violation, which would be the fraternization, socializing with, the person you're supposed to be working for and protecting. That would show signs of, some favoritism, and that also is a policy violation. Now, this is it's a sticky issue, not just because it involves the mayor, not just because it involves Officer Vappy, who's already been reprimanded for a couple of instances involving his protection of the mayor, but because this is the PIB under the watch of the federal consent decree judge and monitors. PIB was dragged into a 3-day federal court hearing after a scathing report from the monitors about how PIB handled the previous investigation.
And PIB, Public Integrity Bureau?
Public Integrity Bureau, the internal the internal investigation unit within the police department policing itself. And they were really raked over the coals for really a whole list of deficiencies in that investigation. Never interviewing the mayor, never interviewing other people with knowledge and information about all the time he was spending with mayor, and not getting Officer Vappy's cell phone. And what was interesting about that was there was a scathing report, there was a 3-day federal court hearing, and actually a scathing final, I guess, determination by the federal judge that the NOPD and NOPD PIB in particular violated many of its own policies and some of the things that they were trying to shore up with the consent decree. But the federal judge, Susie Morgan, stopped short of sanctions, which she could have leveled against the police department, because Ann Kirkpatrick presented a remedial action plan, and really this, stated more or less that the police department has turned over a new leaf. They're going to do better, and in this case, it's such a hot potato that we've already gotten indications that the PIB and the police department are not going to handle this one.
And you're talking about this one being that photo, and
being the photo
instance of
and
dining on
that's
on
right.
the balcony.
It was going to be farmed out to an outside law firm, most likely,
okay.
for the
So we'll see
investigation.
if
Oh,
there are
she
any
said
repercussions
definitely
of
this
that.
morning that they're putting it to law firms.
That is happening.
That specializes in this kind of law.
Exactly, and there was some debate, would it be an inspector general, but it looks like it's now going to be an outside law firm, hasn't been named. That still has to be decided, but that's where this one's going.
Okay, all of this over a lunch on the balcony, and I think actually it was the weekend before Jazz Fest. I mean, French Quarter Fest.
Yeah.
I think that's Sunday
last
before.
week.
Yeah. Okay, well, we shall see where this goes. Thanks a lot, Mike. Okay, over to you, LeBron. And you reported on a report that has been released by Newcomb regarding intimate partner violence and its cost.
Yes, and Dr. Anita Raj is the executive director of the Newcomb Institute now. Been there about a year. What is interesting is this is the second violent study that they've done. The first one addressed the prevalence of violence in the state. And, this one talks about the specific costs in the state, and the figure is pretty dramatic. $10 billion is what they're saying intimate partner violence cost
That's
us.
annual cost.
That is annual cost. Now let's back up a little bit, because I asked her, so what's the difference between domestic violence and intimate partner violence? She said intimate partner violence is a type of domestic violence. Domestic could also include elder abuse or something of that nature. We're talking about two people that are involved in a relationship, if you will. Woman, man, 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 woman, woman, whatever, it is a different deal. It's a relationship violence. And that the prevalence of that is so high, of that $10 billion, about a little over, the lion's share, a little over $8 billion towards medical costs, because sometimes those medical costs can be long-term. The second portion of that, about 8% in lost earnings. And there's another cost in there, justice system, in terms of what it costs the justice system here locally, statewide. That's the smaller cost. But the study sort of breaks down all of this, and hearing these alarming numbers and speaking to Dr. Raj. And by the way, this was done with a team, she's one of the 3 people, and they are out-of-state researchers. But it was about Louisiana. It was all Louisiana figures and stats and everything else. But asking, who are we talking to in this particular study? Because certainly someone who is committing intimate partner violence doesn't, you know what I mean, doesn't care anything about what the study says. And what they're hoping to do is affect policy going forward to try to deal with prevention, and putting systems and policies in place that deal with prevention and early catching this stuff when kids are in school. There are signs of violence, and if there's violence in the household, and counseling and things of that nature.
Well, let me ask you, just the incidence of these kind of cases, what is it like in the state
About
of Louisiana?
77,000 a year.
And primarily against women?
Primarily against women, yep. Primarily against women. So, and which is also alarming. We have one of the highest incidents in the country of this intimate partner violence. But it's a very thorough study, and it breaks down an awful lot. The Newcomb website has the study, and you can click right to it. But getting back to the issue of...
Real quick, LeBron, just on the stats alone,
Uh-huh.
of the 77,000 reported incidents a year, how many of those are repeat complaints?
There are probably some of those as well, and that's probably broken down in the study, but it is pretty ugly.
Right, and we just hear from NOPD
Yes.
that they are frequently going to the same address, involving the same people in some kind of domestic complaint.
Well, in the case of those 3 children getting tragically killed last year, burned up in that fire by their father, that is a house that police there was an entire rap sheet of how many times they had been there, how many times this had happened, and just not having resources in place to sort of prevent a lot of this stuff is really as bad as the problem as the incidences that are occurring.
So this information now that's been gathered from this report, how can this be turned into policy to prevent it?
What they're hoping to do is and she readily admits that we're in an environment right now, politically and otherwise, certainly where we are in Baton Rouge, sort of reversing some of the crime reform things that were geared toward, prevention and things of that nature. She says, well, it can't stop us. It shouldn't, and it can't stop us from doing the work and having the stats anyway. But these are the people that we really need to talk to, and that partner agencies around the state can also take a look at these numbers and affect their policy and affect how they do business, if you will. It's all hill to climb.
A big price tag in more ways than one, really.
Yeah, $10 billion should
monetarily.
get all of our attention. It certainly should get the folks at Baton Rouge attention. There's probably a better way for us to do this.
All right, LeBron, thanks a lot. Very interesting study.
Sure.
And that is on their website. So
Yes,
the whole,
it is.
And do you know, what is that website again? Is it, do you remember that?
I think it's Newcomb. I'm not sure, but if you Google Tulane University's website, tulane.edu, it is certainly not hard to find the Newcomb Institute
to track
website
down.
right on there. Yep. Click
Okay.
right through.
All right, thanks a lot. E, over to you. There's a recall effort for the coroner over in St. Tammany Parish.
Yeah, the recall process we saw last year in New Orleans is an interesting process, not very seldom successful. But what happened in St. Tammany Parish was that there was a vacancy in the coroner's office last year, and so a deputy coroner was elected unanimously. In coroner's elections, people really don't pay that much attention to, and so it was an easy election because there was no controversy. Well, it turns out after the election there was a controversy. As someone pointed out, that the person who won, a guy named Christopher Tape, who was a doctor, in 2012 he was arrested in New Mexico under 6 sexual assault charges. It went to the courts. The courts ultimately quashed it because the complaint was that there was too much of a time lag between the actual incidents and going to court, and so the case was thrown out. So nothing legal came out of it, and the defendant denied anything ever happening. Anyway, ultimately moves to St. Tammany Parish. He was elected, and this question comes up, and with all the sensitivity about sexual assaults, all of a sudden you have a coroner who said 6 cases, again, cases that were thrown out against them. So there's a recall movement. 2 of the women who started the recall movement, one of them's a nurse, and both of them said that as a child, they were victims of sexual assault. And so they know the psychological damage that comes with it. They say, a coroner is not just for the dead. I mean that they have a big impact on people's lives. So as a recall effort, it's a very complex formula for determining how many signatures you need. It's based on the population of your parish. As parishes go, St. Tammany is a pretty well-populated parish. It'll take about 40,000, between 35 and 40,000 successful petitions to have the recall election. And then the recall election, depending on how it comes out, is in there. As long as they've had the system in Louisiana, and every state has a system like that, through the years there have been like 116 recall efforts, and 73 of them succeeded. And so most of them don't get to that final phase. What happens a lot of times is there's some kind of issue. People are all fired up, like what happened with Latoya Cantrell. They volunteer, they say we go out every weekend and get signatures, and then it just runs out. It runs out of energy. There's so much effort to get all of those signatures, and what if a signature is wrong? And so usually they fail. I mean, that part of the process fails. But this is going on in St. Tammany. They have 180 days to come up with the petition, so that would probably call a recall election sometime in October.
If they get enough signatures, legitimate signatures.
I think part of the passion has been driven out there also by, okay, we've elected this guy or allowed him to be elected by no one else running, by him running unopposed.
Without opposition.
Without opposition. And there is this issue, okay, if we're embarrassed by what his past is, then one of his first official actions is to take away a sex crimes nursing unit. Read the room, that almost doubles down that folks that are feeling that way and drove that passion up a bit.
But that has been reinstated, right? Is that back at the
Not
coroner's
really.
office?
No, it's not been reinstated within the coroner's office, which is how it went before, and it covered several parishes, St. Tammany and surrounding parishes. But now it's being transferred over to hospitals, which they state that a woman victim of sexual violence going to an emergency room is just not going to get the care and treatment of a specialized unit within a coroner's
specially
office.
trained nurses, nurse examiners for sexual assault.
And just to clarify, on the original allegations against Dr. Tape revealed by my colleague David Hammer in exclusive, investigative report, those charges against Dr. Tape, it wasn't ever, weighed guilt versus innocence. The time to prosecute those lapsed under a speedy trial motion because they were not brought by the prosecutors in enough time. Dr. Tape himself admitted that he did spank a girl's bare bottom and felt it afterward for welts, which is among the reasons, guilt or innocence on the criminal charges, what he has admitted is rubbing a lot of people in St. Tammany the wrong way.
Right. Okay. Well, we're going to have to move on in this, but the recall effort has started. They have 180 days, and they have a steep hill to climb.
Yeah, and usually the bigger the jurisdiction, the less successful these movements are, because it's just hard to mobilize people. We saw it with the Mike Annie movement; it didn't pass, or didn't get the signatures, and the same thing with Latoya Cantrell.
Right.
A smaller area is better able to get the percentage of signatures.
All right. We'll see where it goes over the next 180 days. Thanks, E. Okay, Mike, over to you. Kind of quick on the low barrier homeless shelter in the city of New Orleans. You did a piece on that, and it's really had some problems.
Yeah, and this is the city's most ambitious effort. There are a lot of nonprofits who work in this arena, But this is the city's effort, and it's matching what has been done successfully in other cities, which is create a low barrier shelter in which homeless people can come and go. They don't need to list their name, provide an ID. There's no lockdown. But on the other hand, there are not extensive services to address mental health issues, drug or alcohol addiction. It really is a safe haven. What I was able to find by talking to people who have worked in the low barrier shelter, residents, and then even current employees, that it is anything but a safe haven. It is a shelter that is full of contraband, including weapons, knives, blades, hammers.
Which are not allowed there,
Absolutely not allowed.
ostensibly.
And in fact, there's a metal detector, there's a wand, and security that is supposed to prevent those from getting in. But we saw just a couple of weeks ago a stabbing of 2 residents by a 3rd resident with a knife, a blade, and that 3rd resident subsequently shot by a security guard. So that violent episode really, brought attention to what for most people is out of sight, out of mind. We're not really seeing what goes on. Fortunately, there were some brave people who were, willing to sit down and expose all kinds of, drug use, people, shooting up outside and inside of this facility.
So it sounded like it was a fencing operation too for the people who
And
buy stolen goods there.
I got to tell you, I expected the drug and alcohol use. I expected elements of violence. That's a difficult population to deal with. I didn't expect to hear that this was almost a open marketplace of stolen goods.
Wow.
And that the employees of the shelter are right up there buying the goods that are being brought in by residents.
Okay, so real quick then, because we quickly run out of time here on this show, but are things getting better? Things going to change? There's a new operator coming in?
As if what was exposed is not bad enough, there's been real trouble with the previous operator, Start Corporation. Once they expanded the shelter from 100 originally when it opened in 2018 to 346, but they didn't increase the staff. Star Corporation's out after disputes with the city. The Odyssey House is supposed to take over operation with the budget from $3 million to $6 million a year in the hands of Odyssey House on June 1st.
All right, and we certainly hope that things will get better because that's really the linchpin of the homeless plan.
About a quarter of the homeless population is in and out of there on any given day.
It's an important facility. All right, Mike, thanks a lot. And we're going to wrap up with you with good news because it's Jazz Fest time.
Less than a week away from Jazz Fest, and got the email today that the Locals tickets, a single sale for Locals Thursday, which, as we were talking, has moved from the second weekend, because that's the Stones Thursday, to the first Thursday this year. They've gone on sale, and I'm a big fan of the fest. I've been there for years, go every year, but I'm also a big fan of local musicians. And it's the time of the year when, more local musicians are employed between both French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest, some of the same musicians, but by the hundreds, and that's everything from every culture bearer you can imagine, from Mardi Gras Indians to brass bands to whatever, to singers. And so we're back at that time. Of course, the big names this year is the Stones. That date sold out.
And
because
so that
there were
is
fewer tickets.
the second Thursday.
Yes,
that
second
would have
Thursday.
been the Locals Thursday.
That is
now, there's
correct.
going to be regular music playing
Earlier
throughout
in the
that
day,
right?
That's right. Earlier in the day. And when the Stones take over, only the Stones stage will be open, which is why a fewer amount of tickets were sold for that day. And it has sold out because you want to make sure that everyone that is at the fairgrounds can at least see some of the Stones. And if you sell an entire day with all of the everybody, then there's no way that we can fit all of those people in one area of the Jazz Festival.
And so some other names that are going to be the big names of the Jazz Festival. There's so many musicians.
Why is everybody so excited about Foo Fighters?
Foo Fighters are huge, and this is their first appearance since, Taylor Hawkins passed away, the drummer, tragically, and back on tour now. And their first appearance in New Orleans, I should say, not first appearance. They've been doing some dates and all, and so they're a huge band. They're an international band. It's like seeing U2 or somebody like that. They're the real deal. You know, Dave Grohl, and those guys also have been here. Dave Grohl has done stuff with New Orleans musicians. He's played at Preservation Hall. He flies in when the band's not on tour. You know, a lot of great relationships here. John Baptiste coming back home. Happy about that, and everybody wants to see his show post Oscars, post Grammys, post the documentary and all that. So just a big couple of weeks, and I am the guy interested in all the food. As you can tell, I don't miss a
And
soft
there's a
shell
lot
po'
of food
boy
for
or
you
two.
to be
And there,
interested in and to sample and to enjoy. So
You can
just
try
a
one
really,
of each
yeah,
booth
try
there?
one of each.
just of all of those,
Sample.
of
I
all of those foods.
sample.
Now the Stones. I mean, the Stones were supposed to
Yeah.
be here on 2 or 3 different occasions.
Yes.
And please let the weather be good.
Please let the weather be good. That's the only thing that might throw this weirdly. You know, they were originally planned, and then COVID hits. No. First thing was Mick Jagger had to have the heart surgery, and then they put him back on, and then COVID hits, and then that was the date that had been moved from the spring to the fall, and that was the resurgence, and it couldn't happen. So.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
I mean,
We're
people
gonna
have their
demand
tickets
that
and
it
they're ready to
happens.
go.
That is exactly
All right,
it.
very good. Thanks a lot, guys. All right, other stories. E.
Yeah, you know, a couple of horrible shooting incidents at bars the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
One of them 2 weeks ago was the one at Wits End, where a security guard was shot and killed. And yesterday, former Judge Arthur Hunter came out with a statement saying, "You need to get New Orleans police off duty, New Orleans police." And he was talking about that. And I know I've asked Mike to kind of comment on this also.
Well, yeah, there is a prohibition on officers working off-duty details in ABOs, alcoholic beverage outlets, and this is, I guess, a call for that to be potentially reconsidered.
All right, well, because we had the other mass shooting, which actually occurred outside of the bar, right?
Outside at Republic.
Of the
Yeah.
Republic
In the warehouse
too.
district, right?
Okay, all right, Mike. Anything else you got to add?
Well, you know, in a few hours, we will know whether this is good news or bad news on the Pelicans. They're in the final opportunity in the play-in against Sacramento Kings. It's at home to determine whether they will be in the actual playoffs and play a 7-game series. If they win, it would be the Oklahoma City Thunder. And if they lose, that's it for this season. On to the next. Zion Williamson, their star, who's really coming on strong,
out for 2 days.
injured,
Yeah.
will not be playing tonight.
Okay, well, we hope that everybody, when they see this repeat on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock,
hope
well,
that
9:30, at 9:30, we'll have a smile on their face.
Hoping that's good news, right?
We're hoping.
What's up?
Yeah, last thing I have is on the Culture Bearer stuff. You know, we do these Super Sunday things with the Mardi Gras Indians, and the final one is the one on the West Bank. It always happens the weekend or so before Jazz Fest. That was supposed to happen this Sunday, but we got a 100% chance of rain. It's been postponed. Mother's Day is the new date they're looking at.
Okay, thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.